The 15th of November 2025, Albufeira, Algarve, Portugal, Storm Claudia. Tornadoes are among the most violent forces. Born from chaotic collisions of warm and cold air, fueled by unstable atmospheric layers and sculpted by the invisible hand of wind shear, these rotating columns of destruction can form in minutes and reshape landscapes in seconds.
Oh my! Oh shit, it's a tornado!
Their power is often underestimated, especially in regions where they are rare, like coastal Portugal. Yet even in places far from the vast tornado-prone plains of North America, the atmosphere can still arrange the perfect sequence of ingredients needed to unleash a spiraling monster of wind. When that happens, nothing in its path, not homes, not vehicles, not trees, is spared. Meteorologists often describe tornado intensity not simply by wind speed, but by the damage they inflict. A moderate tornado can tear roofs away and snap trees. A strong tornado can overturn cars, destroy buildings, and send debris flying like shrapnel. The most violent, though incredibly rare, can lift houses from their foundations and reduce entire neighborhoods to scattered rubble. In the Algarve, such phenomena are so unusual that many people living or vacationing there have never even considered the possibility of one striking. Yet nature thrives on unpredictability, and under the swirling influence of Storm Claudia, the atmosphere over southern Portugal temporarily resembled the perfect incubator for rotating winds. On the morning of the 15th of November 2025, Albufeira woke to the familiar pulse of a storm. Wind rattling shutters, distant thunder, dark skies heavy with rain. But there was nothing normal about what was brewing just above the rooftops. Beneath the rolling cloud layers, bands of warm air pushed inland from the Atlantic, colliding with cooler, descending winds from the storm's core. Meteorological instruments registered sharp changes in directional wind shift, vertical motion, and pressure, classic signatures of tornadic potential, though unnoticed by those preparing their breakfasts or packing their beach bags. By mid-morning, the sky carried an eerie glow, the kind that precedes atmospheric upheaval, a dim pale light filtering through turbulent clouds. At around 11 a.m., atmospheric rotation tightened abruptly, creating what experts would later describe as an extreme wind phenomenon, almost certainly a tornado. The vortex descended near the Albufeira camping park, spinning with terrifying force. Branches twisted violently, metal groaned, and structures shook as the swirling column tore through the site. Trees bent to unnatural angles before snapping, caravans lifted off the ground, and lightweight mobile homes were ripped apart in seconds. The calm holiday retreat was transformed into a battleground of flying debris, fragments of wood, shattered glass, torn roofing panels, all carried by winds estimated to exceed 100 kilometers per hour. In the campground, destruction was nearly instantaneous. Rows of bungalows that had hosted family vacations for years crumpled like paper. Walls buckled inward, roofs peeled away, and support beams fractured. A handful of cars were flipped or shoved into unnatural positions, with metal frames dented and windows blown out. People who had been sitting outside or preparing lunch suddenly found themselves caught in a maelstrom, struggling to hold on to anything stable. Shouts of fear were drowned out by the roar of the wind. Within moments, parts of the campsite were unrecognizable, a chaotic landscape of collapsed structures and strewn belongings. The tornado, still energized by the unstable conditions overhead, continued its destructive advance toward the adjacent Eden Resort Hotel. The buildings, more solid than the mobile homes of the camping park, resisted at first, but even concrete and steel struggled against the fierce rotating winds. Balconies tore away from the facade, crashing onto walkways below. Windows exploded inward, sending shards of glass across rooms and corridors. Outdoor furniture flew like missiles across the resort grounds. Trees lining the gardens were uprooted entirely or stripped of their branches. Guests who had been relaxing in their rooms or strolling outdoors ran for cover as the storm descended in full force. As the vortex weakened and moved on, a new danger emerged almost immediately: torrential rain. Storm Claudia had already saturated the region for days, and the intense downpour that followed the tornado pushed drainage systems beyond their limits. Sheets of rain hammered the streets of Albufeira, flowing rapidly downhill toward lower residential and commercial areas. The city's old town, with its narrow streets and sloping alleys, became a channel for rushing water. Streams of muddy runoff carried leaves, branches, and broken debris from the higher parts of the city down into the central squares. Flooding developed with alarming speed. Storm drains, overwhelmed by the sudden volume, began to overflow, causing water to rise along sidewalks and seep into shops, restaurants, and ground floor apartments. In some areas, the water reached knee height, swirling around parked cars and pushing small objects downstream. Residents looked on anxiously as water flowed through doorways and flooded storage rooms, kitchens, and storefronts. Emergency services received dozens of calls from people stranded in low-lying homes or trapped in vehicles unable to navigate inundated streets. Landslides and small mud flows occurred along the outskirts of the city, especially in zones where soil had been loosened by days of wind and rain. Hillsides became unstable, sending clumps of earth sliding onto rural roads, adding another layer of danger for motorists and first responders attempting to reach affected areas. The fire services, already stretched thin by the damage in the camping park and hotel, now had to dispatch units to rescue trapped drivers, clear blocked roads, and assist people whose homes were being overtaken by water. Back at the campsite and hotel, rescue efforts intensified. Firefighters worked urgently to ensure no one was trapped under the collapsed bungalows. Paramedics moved swiftly from one injured person to the next, assessing wounds caused by falling debris, broken glass, and blunt impacts. Blankets were wrapped around those trembling from shock, while others were led to makeshift triage areas where medical personnel attempted to bring order to the chaos. The sound of sirens echoed across Albufeira as more emergency vehicles arrived, filling the streets and access roads around the disaster zone. Inside the city, volunteers and local residents mobilized spontaneously. People formed human chains to help guide children and elderly individuals through flooded streets. Store owners attempted to block rising water with sandbags and improvised barriers. Tourists, many of whom had never experienced such intense weather, stood on higher ground watching streams of water flow through the heart of the town. Restaurants that had been preparing for lunchtime crowds instead shut their doors, redirecting efforts to protect refrigerators, supplies, and electrical equipment from the flooding. As the rain continued to fall, traffic came to a near standstill. Police redirected cars away from heavily flooded areas, and some roads were temporarily closed entirely due to high water or fallen debris. The city's drainage infrastructure, designed for moderate storms, had little chance against the combination of intense rainfall and wind-borne materials that clogged gutters and pipes. Crews attempted to clear blockages, but the sheer volume of water made the task nearly impossible. The emotional atmosphere across Albufeira was palpable. The contrast between the storm's violence and the town's usual tranquil beauty left many in shock. Families huddled together, some crying softly, others staring blankly at the damaged landscape around them. Visitors, who had arrived expecting sunshine and relaxation, now found themselves without shelter, their belongings scattering the drenched ground. Even longtime residents, accustomed to winter storms, struggled to reconcile what they had witnessed, a tornado-like event that had struck with overwhelming speed and power, followed by flooding that engulfed parts of their city. Throughout the afternoon, rain clouds gradually began to thin, though intermittent showers continued to fall. As the intensity of the downpour eased, emergency crews gained a better view of the full extent of the damage: streets covered in mud and debris, collapsed structures at the campsite, shattered windows at the hotel, uprooted trees blocking intersections, flooded neighborhoods where water had soaked into homes and businesses, all stood as stark reminders of the storm's destructive potential. By evening, Authorities began organizing evacuation for those who had lost their accommodation. Buses transported displaced families and tourists to temporary shelters in community centers and school gymnasiums. Supplies were distributed: blankets, warm clothing, water bottles, basic hygiene kits. Volunteers prepared meals and comforted those still trembling from shock. Medical staff continued treating injuries, both physical and psychological. Some people were reunited with loved ones after hours of uncertainty. Others waited anxiously for information about missing relatives or friends. As darkness fell, the city grew quieter, not from relief but from exhaustion. The constant hum of emergency operations continued, but the tension of the day slowly gave way to a somber stillness. Yet even in that quiet, the sound of dripping water, creaking structures, and distant sirens served as reminders of the ordeal Albufeira had endured.
Elle prend plein de choses sur son passage. Ben là-bas, attention. Wow, c'est impressionnant. Elle vient de passer là. Elle vient de passer, elle vient de tout casser. Plein de trucs chez les voisins. Regarde comment elle passe là.
In the following days, assessments would reveal the true scale of the event. Civil engineers documented damage to buildings. Forestry teams counted uprooted trees. City workers cleared roads and restored drainage systems. Meteorologists analyzed radar data and ground surveys to determine the exact nature of the wind phenomenon. And as Albufeira began its long path to recovery, the memory of that morning remained vivid in the minds of all who experienced it. Storm Claudia's passage through the Algarve may have lasted only hours, but its impact on the community, its landscape, its infrastructure, its spirit, would endure far longer. The tornado-like winds, the collapsed campsite bungalows, the damaged hotel, the torrential rains and sudden flooding in the city, all combined into a single, unforgettable chapter in the region's history. For a town known for its beaches, nightlife, and calm Mediterranean charm, the 15th of November 2025 stood as a sobering reminder of nature's power. A reminder that even in places defined by sun and serenity, the atmosphere can turn in an instant, revealing forces capable of reshaping both the land and the lives of those who inhabit it.